I've got 6 o'clock, go ahead and please call the roll for the word stand and pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you everyone for the attendance. Now, the minutes can reflect the role of various trustees in the department. As let's move forward. We need to do any introductions. It's been a month. I mean, everybody's going to look at it. All right, entertain a motion for the approval of the 620 village board, 620 of the whole file, the 425 joint library board, 524 plan commission minutes as presented. All right, second. Motion and a second, as all the comments, questions, clarifications on the minutes.
One correction. On the committee of the whole, second to last page, the third paragraph, it should say question law.
All right, any other comments, questions? That being said, those changes, all in favor? All right, opposed? That motion passes. Anybody wishing to be heard? All right, any information has been presented in normal fashion. Item 6, resolution ordinance actions items. We have one, and that is a motion to approve the projects as identified for the 2022 purchases to be funded by our funds.
I will lead off with a brief introduction. Director Stedahar is here to help out as well, I believe in there. Okay. So following the committee of the whole meeting, staff went back with that working list of projects defined by year to number one, make sure numbers for the projects were refined and that the cost estimates were accurate. And number two, to take a look at the timeline for either delivery or completion of the project. Because if a project is completed or a piece of equipment delivered in a given year, that is when it has to be booked by accounting rules. So picking on an item, the 1-yard dump truck from Public Works. Well, it's appreciated and identified as a potential for a 2022 project. There's no logistical way because of supply chain issues and whatnot and setup time that we would be able to take delivery of that this year. So that one got moved to 2023. That's the easiest example I can give. But that being said, staff again visited those timelines and whatnot to help determine by year when projects could be accomplished. So with that, attached to the IFC is the updated list of the identified projects with updated numbers and also updated timelines as far as when or which project year they could fall. As you recall, part of our discussion as well was to work to avoid the federal audit threshold of $750,000. One thing we have come to learn since that committee of the whole meeting is that receiving Ozaukee County ARPA funds counts against our federal dollar threshold of spending. It doesn't matter that it came to the county first. We would be the ones spending that money for fire and EMS staff. So therefore it would count against our threshold. That is one significant moving part here that we need to think about as we look forward. That being said, we believe with the timing of a potential hire and getting those county ARPA dollars accompanied with other federal grants that we have had awarded or could potentially be awarded in 2022. The 2022 projects as listed would be okay and not trigger a federal audit. That being said, 2023 is a different story because of the increased Ozaukee County ARPA funding potentially coming through, but also the significance of the projects that are proposed and equipment purchases that are proposed in 2023, we would stand a good chance of triggering that federal audit threshold. That said, there's a couple of things here that I mentioned are still in flux. One of them being the pursuit of a grant for an additional school resource officer. The village would look to pursue this grant if we are able to get to a point of being able to strike another cost sharing agreement. Because what the grant would do would help us get started, but the village cannot afford another SRO, school resource officer, to be added to staff without that cost sharing. And that cost sharing would look to also involve the private schools here in town. So that is something that is in flux, if you will, and to be determined. We do have a meeting with school officials later this month, being Chief Caponera and myself, to see what we may be able to strike as far as a potential for a cost sharing agreement. So that grant may or may not figure into it, because if we cannot strike a cost sharing agreement, the village cannot afford to fund that alone. We would not pursue that grant, because the way that grant is structured is it only partially funds for a couple of years and then completely goes away. And the village is then completely on the hook for funding that position. And we are not in a position there yet to add another officer. As I mentioned earlier, the county ARPA dollars, that these rules are, I guess, kind of evolving, if you will. Right now, the answer we have, that would count against our federal dollars being spent. Now, over time, if there's a larger number of municipalities being impacted by that rule, could the treasury change that audit requirement? Possibly, but we don't know. Right now, the information we have is what we're reporting, that it would in fact count towards triggering that federal audit. So with all of that being said, what we have before the village board this evening is a good, solid 2022 project list that we would avoid a federal audit, and a 2023 list that identifies projects, but considering things that may change, we don't know if that would trigger a federal audit. As it sits right now, it would, but it may not. So that's where we are.
Against our vote total.
It would, because it's a federally funded grant program.
All right, and then the project, 2022 project list, you feel comfortable that we can get them completed?
Yes.
All right, I'll open it up for comments, questions.
Yeah, 75,000 2023 project year.
Mhm.
Police department locker room, I thought that was moved to 2027.
So we're focusing on 2022, what number?
Under the 2023 portion of that table, $75,000 was identified for police department locker room. That was an item that was in the capital plan, but
What
it was,
about that?
So as we move forward, as we've been doing, approved tonight, even if it was approved in 2023, we come back next year, project looks for.
correct.
The original budgets are all.
I thought Chief Caponera had said, and Assistant Chief Krista, maybe you remember this from the meeting, that did we have a problem in our grant for the SRO officer? Was that what he was talking about, getting it in late? Do you remember?
No.
Something else?
Yeah, it was a different grant. And I'm sorry, I mean, I forget which one it was.
That was, for the accreditation.
There we go.
Okay,
Yep.
okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Yes.
So he does have a grant already for this.
Yes, an application could be submitted, but we don't want to pursue it
Right.
in earnest unless we're able to get a good level of comfort that we might be able to strike a cost share agreement. Because the long term, after that grant goes away, we cannot afford, the village cannot afford an SRO ourselves.
Then another thing I just want to ask about is, it was interesting to me that we're going to now reach out and ask private schools if they want to work with us. I feel like we're crossing the line of private and, village. Because at any point in time, if those cost shares change
Mhm.
down the road, where are we withholding the bag for the rest of the office? I know that the officers check in with the private schools on a regular basis
Mhm.
now. I don't know what would be different going forward. So I guess I'm concerned
Sure.
about, we're reaching out to a private company.
No, private as in parochial schools.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, people pay to go there.
Sure, but we're talking about the parish schools here in the village. And that there was interest in potentially having a lighter police presence, but a consistent police presence. Whereas our current, the way I understand it, our current SRO really is monopolized between the high school and middle school. And very little time, if any, or very, very limited time, can go to the elementary schools. And that's really would be, my understanding is the focus of this secondary SRO.
So that's just my worry about using the funding later and we're stuck over the bank.
And that's exactly why we would definitely want a level of comfort that we might be able to strike a cost sharing agreement. Because once the grant would be intended to get us started. And as that goes away, then we roll more into the terms of a cost sharing agreement. Where again, we're not fully funding the portion of it. The Grafton School District wouldn't also be fully funding the portion of it. It would be spread out because of that secondary
Yeah,
officer.
and I think there's, my question is, even if we did do an SRO, even if we had that a cops grant, and even if, the county had, did a hiring yet this year, and we had to assume a portion of those hiring funds. Is that gonna get us to that 750 number? It seems it's still right at 475.
No, for 2022, if we were to,
I'm thinking, would it make sense, if you look at maybe the, is it possible to get the light bulb, or is there any reason why we can't get them?
there's a back order issue, and there's also issues getting a straight answer out of the Department of Transportation as to what exactly they'll accept.
What about the LED light changeover project?
That I do not know enough about that, other than to say, the information that was reported to us is that it would be delivered in 23 for installation.
So everything that's on 2023. That's none of the smaller ticket items.
Not per reports from the departments, no.
All right, comments, questions? All right, now I'm entertaining a motion to approve projects as identified for the 2022 purchases to be funded with ARPA funds.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second. Motion, and then we'll just get the second over there, all in favor?
I,
Any opposed? That motion passes. Move on to department officers report. Jesse, you want to just skip up?
Just a few things here this evening. It is that time of year for the clerk's office again. Election ramp up. The clerk's office will be assisting with absentee voting at Village Point Commons this week. This is per the standing request from that facility that clerk's office staff visits them to assist with absentee voting. That being said, next week, or excuse me, the following week then, in-person absentee voting begins here at Village Hall. And then August 9th is the partisan primary. The fire and EMS work group continues to chug along. We have kind of broken out into smaller subgroups. The fire chiefs are working on information regarding a potential organizational chart on what a department could look like. Administrators being Port Washington, Saukville, myself, Cedarburg, town of Cedarburg. We met and we continue work on finalizing a work plan that will outline the goals and objectives and deliverables of the work group as we explore the potential for consolidation. That being said, that work plan will be published not only for the work group, but also the respective boards and councils of each community. So please look for that in the near future here as that gets finished up. Tomorrow morning, the Ozaukee County Public Safety Committee will be meeting to review ARPA grant applications for fire and EMS staffing. Taking a quick peek at the meeting packet, the published packet and staff report does note a recommendation to approve funding for Grafton. Chief Rice has indicated he will be attending that meeting. So things are looking positive. We will see what action comes of that county committee up to the full board. So that is the latest and greatest that I have.
Any applications for the position in the water department?
We actually, as I noted in the weekly report, we are actually very happy to provide a internal promotion opportunity to Brandon Warner. He's been with us since 2014. Initially started in Public Works and then transferred over to utility. We are actually utilizing the same processes to when we promoted Dan Fisher, whereby he is currently acting field operations coordinator for the next 60 days. During that time, he can find out whether this change in responsibilities fits him as a professional, but also provides myself, Director Thomas, and Assistant Director Grease time to observe and mentor him in that role. It is a pretty significant change as he's a field operator outside all the time. This is a balance where actually it's more heavily weighted on the administrative office side of things with some field work. So it would be a change for him professionally speaking. But that said, we had 2 internal candidates interview. Both presented a good set of qualifications. Mr. Warner definitely provided us good reason to provide this promotional opportunity. So we're pretty excited about that. That being said, at the end of this acting period, assuming it's successful, we would then look to backfill that crew or operator position. So,
That's a nice transition with having somebody from the.
yep, very helpful, very helpful. You're welcome.
Jesse, I know that the recyclables got missed a couple of times.
Okay.
In the last couple of weeks in some areas. Can you remind me where we are with the status of the garbage contract? Do you know?
The garbage contract, I believe, runs through the end of next year, if I'm recalling correctly. With the actual up until the recent misses, some pretty decent service and consistent service, and actually response from Waste Management. We were going to stay status quo. That said, we will have to badger them again if we're starting to run into service issues.
I would have anybody that has- make sure they go on them.
Please.
Anybody that does have a complaint, make sure they call them in so we can
Yep.
track them.
They didn't get mine.
Okay.
This is a question for Paul. On the ARPA supply chain issue you brought up, you said they only are, we are charged a year that we receive them.
Yeah, accounting principles are the year the service is received, whether goods are received.
What about down payments, things like that?
They'd be classified as a prepaid, the expense would be recognized in the year that actually took place.
So for, now I'll look for consensus from the board, but can you start, digging into the LED and the light poles then as soon as possible? And if we have to, and if we have to order them now, to have them, get them into the supply chain so we can get them in for spring. As soon as the snow melts, let's do it. That's consensus.
Good.
I don't want to be having this discussion next year. Any other questions, comments? All right, let's move forward. The licenses, motion for approval of operators license 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Listed in there, includes where they are available for employment. Approval.
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
And motion passes approved on to Martini Beach.
Yes, I guess a 10,000 foot summary would be that the owner of Martini Pete's has submitted and paid for a renewal liquor license, Class B liquor license. That being said, as of this morning and speaking with the clerk's office, inspections being fire and building code inspections have not been passed. So the options for the village board this evening would be to either table it until they are passed, or those inspections are passed and signed off on, or conditionally issue the liquor license subject to those inspections being signed off on. That being said, the clerk's office would not actually turn over the license to the property until the inspections are signed off because of the condition placed by the village board. So there's a couple of options there with regards to not only the Class B liquor license renewal, but also the coin machine amusement device permit for Martini Pete's as well.
We can just take it the action as written. Because the action is subject to satisfaction of all outstanding financial obligations and successful passing of inspections. So, question.
There's a requirement for publication and scrapping within 15 days before license condition.
Mhm.
Has that been done?
Yes. Yep. All right. Any other comments about it? I would just take it as
saying that we're gonna have a motion to authorize it?
I would say take it exactly as written. Because the way it's written, it says subject to satisfaction and the successful passing of the inspections.
That way it doesn't have to come back to the board. The board has approved it. It's conditional. The clerk's office will hold it until that condition is met.
So then I'll have a comment then for that. So then, my comment will be that, again, we're looking at amusement devices. And in the application, he's listed the names of the amusement devices. And, a couple of them look like they're gambling payout type devices. There's 3 types of games. I know that point operated machine, like a jukebox, like a dartboard, like a pool table, also need to have a license. I don't know if he has those in his business. So I'm gonna vote no because of the same issue we're having with the coin operated licenses. And I don't know that this is 100% accurate with what's reported.
One thing to keep in mind, with regards to the village board's, action, pertaining to the amusement devices. We are not the regulatory. This is, by issuing this permit, frankly, it provides revenue to the village. The state is the regulatory and enforcement arm that would actually govern whether or not they're paying out or what have you, or are in accord with state law. That, license, that amusement device permit, is simply, quite frankly, a revenue
So
item for the village.
it's 2 separate actions. This is
Yes.
just the liquor license.
Yep.
Right. This is legal. So this is
Correct.
just the liquor license.
So it makes sense.
So we can deal with the separate item.
Okay, if it's just a liquor license without the gaming,
That's
Yep.
always the approval of
Yep.
issuance of a Class B liquor license.
Correct.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second that.
Motion second, final comments. Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
And motion passes. Item C, I would, we have dealt with the issue at time. I think it's just as valid as the report. I would say we would want to, approve the issuance of state of Wisconsin legally valid gaming devices. If they're not legal in the state of Wisconsin, then I would say not be approved. They would be okay with that.
but yet the next step is, so when the licenses are authorized and we're kind of starting fresh again, will the police department and the fire department go out there to look at those?
We always do these things by exception. If anybody has a complaint, they can make a call over. We would have it in the approval, and then that would be our background stuff.
Okay, so I again feel like we're kind of just closing our eyes to it, so
And I would say we
That's just
we
me.
can't close our eyes. And so I would say that my recommendation would be approve the issue of state of Wisconsin approved coin machine devices. And if they're not approved by the gambling, and they're not approved by the Department of what is it?
Department of Revenue.
Department of Revenue. They can be pulled.
And somebody would have to call the complaint.
So we always do it in flag cases.
Well, the ones that are in all the establishments now, those are approved.
No.
There's village permits issued for them. Whether they comply with state law or not, that would be for the state to investigate and to enforce. The village is not the enforcement arm on those particular pieces of machinery.
This is the difference between our opportunity here, we can put it on paper and say, as a village board, we are not going to approve any unauthorized license, anything that may be out there, people are doing. Somebody's gonna have, like, but in this particular case, the same way we do with plan commission is we basically are being proactive and saying, we're not going to approve any illegal license.
If there was no license, they can still have the device. This is
That's
a
true, too.
Department of Revenue enforcement.
Right.
So as Jesse said, it's really a revenue generator for the village.
So I understand though that when the police department and fire department go out to check the machines,
They check for code violations. The state of Wisconsin has an agent that accompanies the inspection group. They check.
right?
Yeah.
Which is crazy to me that that person is with the group and they still authorize it.
Sure. And
I-
yeah,
I
that,
don't-
I
I
can't
don't
speak for
understand.
their enforcement
Right.
practices.
I,
So our coverage would be to use that language.
Mhm.
Great, motion.
Second.
Motion and second, do you have that language? Final comments? Hearing
Yep.
none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
they,
So 2 nays. Passes. Move on to item 9, entertain a motion for the approval of expenditures of $1,064,191.55. Second, motion and second, I saw the back and forth, questions and answers, any final questions on the bills? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That motion passes. I believe that covers the agenda. Get a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to return.
Second. Motion second, all in favor? Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you all very much. Take care of it.